It's finally here. Federal Personal Defense 357 Magnum HST. I know a lot of people have been waiting for this round for a very long time. Federal announced it, I believe it was at SHOT Show of 2022, somewhere around January of 2022. Now it's November of 2023. Finally, I was able to pick up a box of this stuff. So interesting stuff. It is an HST, but it's a 154 grain 357 Magnum. It's a little bit different weight than what we're typically used to seeing with 357 Mag. You know, generally it's 125 or 158, but 154, and it's rated at 1340 feet per second. So I'm going to test it today through my 4-inch barrel Smith & Wesson 686 and my 2-inch barrel Taurus 605, and we'll see how these perform. So I'm going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy we get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic test. So we're just going to go into plain clear ballistic to see what the best potential is of those cartridges, to see how they perform. Then after that, I'm going to do more of a real world simulation where I'm going to put 4 layers of heavy denim on the first 3-inch block here. And then after that, I'm going to have a 1/4-inch medium density fiberboard that's going to represent hitting ribs or sternum. That'll be more of our real world simulation. We'll see how they perform that way. And then I'm definitely going to shoot at my steel to see what kind of practical accuracy I can get with these. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up, I'm going to run a few rounds through the chronograph with my 4-inch barrel. Federal does use a 4-inch barrel for their test rating velocity. So we're going to see what I get. I'm just going to do 3 rounds so because I only got 1 box of this ammo. So let's see what we get here for our 4-inch barrel. 357 Mag HST, about 5 yards from the target, 4 yards from the chronograph. 1268. I'm just going single action to make sure I get over these sensors correctly. 1236. 1261. So yeah, we're quite a bit below rated velocity. It is a 154 grain, so that is pretty typical energy numbers. When you're talking about like a 158 grain at like 1240, we're a little bit higher than that. 154 at like 1260, 1270. So 2-inch barrel. Let's see what we get here. $11.12, $11.31. 1092. Very, very stout ammunition. I will say that. It's definitely a full power load. Let's hit our ballistics gel block and see how these compare in the different barrel lengths. All right, so let's do our best potential here. 4-inch barrel into plain clear ballistics. Let's see what this does. All right, let me hit that with our 2-inch barrel now, and we'll see how that compares. Take a look. All right, so from what I'm seeing here, it looks like a lot of damage and cutting going on. It's just a very big cut pattern right away. Even in this first 3 inches, we see quite a bit of cutting, and we see a lot of tearing and cutting right here with both barrel lengths. Very similar distance they went. It looks like the 4-inch barrel bounced back a little bit. Probably just had a little more velocity, so it just hit harder and bounced back. I can definitely see expansion with that 4-inch barrel here. We're looking at about 16.5 inches of penetration, which is very, very good, especially for that amount of energy dump to still get to that depth. You know, oftentimes when we see a massive energy dump, like we're seeing this cutting here, it doesn't go past, 11, 12 inches, but 16.5 is pretty good. Our 2-inch barrel, we have the same overall penetration of 16.5 inches. It just didn't bounce back quite as far. Very big expansion. And honestly, the damage in there looks very similar, even though we had a lot less velocity with that 2-inch. So let's put on our heavy denim and put on our MDF rib simulation, see how they compare that way. All right, our 4 layers of heavy denim, and then our 1/4-inch medium density fiberboard after 3 inches to represent our ribs. See how our 4-inch barrel does. Let me set that back up and hit it with the 2-inch. All right, 2-inch barrel. Let's see what this does. Go take a look. All right, this is looking really good here. I'm looking at this medium density fiberboard. We can definitely tell that there's expansion before it hit this. So in this first 3 inches, it's expanding. A little bit tiny bit more with our 4-inch versus our 2-inch, but both expanded really big. And we're seeing in both of these tracks just a massive amount of that MDF being pulled along the track all the way up here, all the way up to the bullet and the 2-inch barrel there. So with our 4-inch barrel, we got a little more penetration than typical, 22 inches. I would not consider that over penetration simply because clear ballistics is a little bit less dense than a real organic gel. So it's gonna go a little bit deeper. It's not something that I'm concerned about, like with it passing through an attacker. I don't think it would. And we got some good expansion on there. Our 2-inch barrel, a whole bunch of that MDF pulled all the way up to the bullet there. We had some bounce back. Our actual depth here was about 21 inches, and then it sucked back to 19 inches. Got good expansion with that as well. So overall, I can say this is performing a lot like the HST 327 mag I tested a few months back, where there's just a lot of damage and cutting, more than typical. So that looks like a really good bullet design. So let me shoot up my steel now and see what kind of practical accuracy I can get with these. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets here. This is through our plain gel right here. Our 4-inch barrel, for whatever reason, it's kind of a busted off pedal on the bottom there. I think it probably hit the shelf because it went kind of low. So it busted off one of those pedals there. Our 2-inch barrel, perfect expansion. It's got all the pedals left. So both of these had really, really good expansion going through our plain gel. Looks like a little bit larger with our 4-inch, a little bit smaller with our 2-inch, but it still expanded quite well. So 4-inch barrel, 2-inch. Now going to our MDF, we see what we typically see with HSTs here. So our 4-inch and then our 2-inch, they look almost identical. So we had very good expansion all together here with our 4-inch barrel plain gel, 4-inch barrel MDF, 2-inch MDF, 2-inch plain gel. Just really not a whole lot to say here other than that's really good performance. This is what we typically see with a really good around. You know, they're not bonded, but they might as well be. You know, they're mechanically locked, so you're not going to get jacket separation. So I like to call them bonded even though they're not really bonded. Just a very good overall design. So looking really good for that. All right, 12 yards from the target. Let me just put a couple on steel, see how they hit from 12 yards. A lot of impact going on there. Busting the paint all off. Let me try the 2-inch barrel, 12 yards. That's a full house Magnum for sure. Let me back it up a little bit more. All right, 40 yards from the target. Why not? Let's see what our 4-inch barrel will do. 4-inch from 40 yards. Miss completely. I don't know how I missed that first one. Probably just anticipating that recoil. I got a couple shots left here. 2-inch barrel. I don't know about this. Let's see what this does. All right, so this is some very hard hitting ammunition. So overall, what I'm seeing here is, judging from the velocity, I haven't done the math yet on it yet, but you know, looking at what we were seeing here, upper 12, you know, 12, 60, 70, 80, 90 with 154 grain, that's going to put it squarely in 357 Magnum territory, full house 357 Magnum territory. So they're doing that, and yet they're putting a really good bullet design in there with a lot of weight. So, you know, I haven't cut into the gel yet. I generally show that before you see this, but I wait to cut into it after this. But what I'm thinking I'm going to see here is probably some really, really big pedal expansion, just because we're still getting extraordinarily deep, but not so deep that like it would make me think that something's off here, because generally like a 158 grain will go a little bit deeper than that. With the cutting and tearing going on, there's got to be a huge amount of expansion going on there, and yet it's still pushing deep. So what that's going to tell you, typically when we look at rounds of ammunition that are good man stoppers, what you're seeing here is that they'll dump energy very quickly, but then it'll kind of dissipate. What we're seeing here is it's dumping energy quickly, tearing, cutting as if it's like a 125 grain, but yet it's still pushing deep. So that's going to tell you that it's going to be more reliable at stopping something bigger, whether it's a big animal or a bigger attacker or something like that. So overall, it's not bad. Now, this is stout ammunition. It wasn't very low in recoil. They just went with it. Hey, this is your defensive HST, so deal with it. So it's very powerful. But what I'm seeing here, it seems pretty good. I personally wouldn't carry it in the 2-inch barrel. A little bit stout of recoil for that. You know, theoretically, it makes more sense to carry a heavier bullet in the stub nose because there's less powder charge and it moves through the barrel slower, so you lose less potential energy versus like a 125 grain. But in the real world, that's one of those things you have to kind of go the other way, where it's like you get so much muzzle rise from a 154, 158 grain that it's too brutal. So it's better to use a 125 grain in a snub, or like me, I like to use a Hot Plus P 38 special. But in the 4-inch barrel, I'm going to say this is definitely a full house load meant for a heavier revolver just by the way it shoots. So good ammunition overall. So that's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.